They called me into the corner office like it was any other Monday. The blinds were half closed, slicing the daylight into narrow bands across the carpet. My boss, suit pressed, smile fixed, gestured for me to sit. Beside him, the HR manager flipped through a folder without meeting my eyes. "We're making some difficult changes," my boss began, voice dipped in false sympathy. "Restructuring. Budget realities, you understand?" I didn't answer. He went on, hands steepled. "Your position is being eliminated. We've decided to bring in someone with a fresh perspective for this next phase." That was when the kid stepped forward from the corner, barely out of school, tie still too long, the same one I'd been training for the past year. He tried to look serious, but his eyes kept darting toward the floor. I knew this dance. I'd seen it done to others, the polite language, the box of personal items waiting in the hall, but I hadn't expected to be the one sitting here. "You've been invaluable," my boss said, like a man reciting lines from a script. "We're grateful for your years of service." I glanced at the kid. "You ready for this?" I asked. He swallowed. "I think so." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. They slid the severance agreement across the desk. I didn't touch it. "Can I get your commitment?" my boss added carefully. "To help with a smooth transition." I let the question hang. My gaze shifted to the window, the skyline beyond it, and then back to him. "We'll see," I said. In the hallway, the receptionist gave me a look. Not pity exactly, but something close. My desk had already been cleared. A cardboard box sat on the floor with my name scrawled in black marker. I picked it up, heavier than it looked. As I walked out, I caught sight of the project board in the open workspace, renderings of the new civic center, timelines, approvals pending. It was the biggest job the firm had ever landed, and I knew something they didn't. Every single permit on that board, every city approval stamp, every critical variance had passed through one channel, my private consulting company. The one I'd set up years ago as a legal firewall, long before they hired me. Without my signature, the project would sit in limbo, $10 million deep in sunk costs. They thought they'd replaced a name on a desk. They'd just cut out the one person who could open the final door. Outside, the cold air hit me. I set the box in the back seat of my car and sat behind the wheel, watching the building's glass facade catch the morning light. Somewhere up there, they were already congratulating themselves on a seamless transition. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was the precise click of pieces falling into place. They wanted a fresh perspective. They were about to get one. And it wasn't going to come from inside their walls. I hadn't planned on working for them forever. When they first approached me, I was running my own small consultancy, moving between mid-sized architectural firms and city planning committees, bridging the gap between design and the brutal reality of municipal approvals. I was good at it. Good enough that when their senior partner called, it wasn't to offer me a job so much as to ask what it would take for me to say yes. They needed someone with relationships inside City Hall, someone who could make a project glide through departments that usually took months to return a single phone call. I told them I'd only consider it if I could keep my consultancy open on paper, a safety net, a legal buffer. They agreed. They didn't care how the paperwork got done, as long as the permits came in. Over the years, those permits brought them more than just smooth timelines. They brought prestige, credibility. Developers who wouldn't have returned their calls before were suddenly booking lunch. Journalists started using phrases like up-and-coming powerhouse to describe the firm. And then came the big one, the Civic Center redevelopment, a $40 million contract that would redefine the skyline. They toasted it in the office with champagne. My name wasn't in the press release, but I knew how it had happened. I'd walked the plans through zoning myself, sat in 3 different cramped conference rooms with department heads, explained why the variances were not just necessary but beneficial to the community. I also knew how much was left to do. The final round of environmental and traffic approvals was still pending, and those approvals didn't go to the firm. They went to me, or more accurately, to my consultancy, which held the formal role of permit coordinator on record. Without that signature, the entire project would be legally frozen. Sitting at my kitchen table that night, I went through the files. Every contract, every letter of authorization, every official city email was addressed to my company. They'd assumed it was just a formality. They'd never asked questions, because for them I was just the man who got things done. They'd wanted my connections, my process, my quiet ability to move a boulder an inch at a time until it was out of the way. But somewhere along the line, they'd started thinking they could have those things without me. I poured a drink and leaned back in my chair. The truth was, they hadn't fired an employee. They'd cut loose the one person who made their biggest project possible. It wasn't bitterness that settled in as I looked over the documents. It was clarity. If they thought I was going to rush to hand over the keys to what I'd built, if they assumed I'd work for free out of some misplaced sense of loyalty, they'd misjudged me completely. The approvals could wait, and while they waited, I'd decide exactly how I wanted this to play out. 2 days after the meeting in that corner office, I walked into the quiet, panelled law firm I'd used a few times over the years. My attorney, Harris, was the kind of man who didn't waste words. He scanned the stack of documents I slid across his desk, flipping each page with deliberate care. When he finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "You're not obligated to sign a thing unless you're compensated," he said. "These permits are contracted through your company, not you personally. They can't bypass you without starting over, and starting over would take 18 months, I finished for him. "At least," he nodded. "That's leverage most people would kill for. Question is, how do you want to use it?" I looked out the window at the grid of streets below. "Not for revenge," I said finally, "for a better deal." By the time I left his office, the plan was simple. We'd send a formal offer to the firm. My signature on the final approvals in exchange for a substantial consulting fee and public credit for my role in the project. No payment, no signature. The next morning, Harris sent the letter by courier. I imagined the reaction when the envelope landed on my former boss's desk. First confusion, then the dawning realization of what it meant. By noon, my phone buzzed with a call from the firm's number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was almost polite. "We'd like to discuss terms. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." I didn't. Instead, I drove past the construction site. From the street, the skeletal frame of the Civic Center was beginning to take shape. Cranes loomed above it, workers moved in bright vests, and on the perimeter fencing, a massive banner bore the firm's logo alongside the words, "Grand Opening, Summer Next Year." Not without me, I thought. That afternoon, I began drafting a list of potential backup options. Other firms, private investors, even city contracts that might benefit from the same network I'd built. I didn't know yet where this would land, but I wasn't going to let my future rest in their hands. The following day, another call came. This one was sharper. "We've received your proposal. It's unexpected. The board will need to review it. We'll be in touch." I almost smiled. Unexpected was corporate speak for "we didn't think you had the guts." That evening, I got a text from one of the junior project managers still at the firm. "Boss is losing it. Meeting with investors tomorrow. Your name came up a lot." I didn't reply. But the next move had just presented itself. If they were already scrambling to explain to the investors why the final permits weren't signed, I had a window. Investors hate delays. They hate surprises even more. And if I showed them that I could deliver the project on time, without the firm's bureaucracy in the way, I might not just get my fee, I might get the whole job. The call came the next morning, just after 9. A deep, measured voice introduced himself as Robert Lang, lead investor on the Civic Center project. "I understand you're no longer with the firm," he said, "but your name is on every approval document. I'd like to meet." We arranged to see each other that afternoon at a private club downtown. The place smelled of leather and old money, the kind of setting where a handshake could move millions. Lang was already seated at a corner table, posture straight, eyes assessing. "Tell me what's going on," he said as soon as I sat. I told him, not the emotional version, the practical one, how my consulting company held the authority on the final permits, how the firm had decided they could replace me with someone who didn't have the relationships or the process to finish the job. How, without my signature, the entire project was at risk of an indefinite freeze. He didn't interrupt. just tapped his index finger against the table in slow rhythm. When I finished, he said, "What do you want?" "Two things," I replied. "A direct contract with the investor group to oversee the permit process until completion, and the freedom to assemble my own team. No middlemen, no interference." Lang considered this, then asked the question I'd been waiting for. "And what happens to the firm?" "That's your decision," I said. "But I'll tell you this, if they stay involved, you'll be paying for their learning curve while the clock runs down." For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he smiled, not warmly, but like a man who'd just spotted the solution to a problem. "You can start Monday," he said. "Send my office your terms. We'll draw up the paperwork." I left the club without looking back, the deal already taking shape in my head. I'd be working for the people who actually mattered, the ones with skin in the game. And I'd be free to run the process the way I knew it needed to be run. That evening, Harris called. "Lang's office reached out," he said. "Sounds like they're serious." "They are," I told him. "And the firm?" "Already sweating," he said. "They called here twice today, wanting to clarify the situation." I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. From my apartment window, I could see the skyline, the cranes still standing over the Civic Center site. The project wasn't just back in my hands, it was in better hands than it had ever been. The firm had tried to make me expendable. Now they were about to learn just how expensive that mistake would be. By Friday morning, the contract with Lang's investor group was signed. My consulting company was now the official permit coordinator for the Civic Center, answerable only to the people writing the checks. The first thing I did was assemble a small team, not flashy, but experienced. 2 former colleagues the firm had let go in previous restructurings. A retired city inspector who knew every loophole in the municipal code, and a project manager I'd worked with years ago who could juggle 3 timelines in her head without dropping a detail. We met in a rented office near City Hall, the kind of place where you could walk to the departments we needed in 5 minutes. I laid out the plan, prioritized the environmental review and the traffic variance, the 2 bottlenecks that could still derail the project. No wasted motion, no endless email chains. We'd be face-to-face with decision-makers until every stamp was in place. That same day, the firm called again. I let it go to voicemail. This time the tone had changed. No corporate pleasantries, just a clipped message from my former boss. "We need to talk. The investors are making moves that affect both of us." Both of us. I almost laughed. By Monday, word was spreading in the industry. My phone lit up with messages from contacts. "Heard you're running the Civic Center now, so the rumors were true. Guess you landed on your feet." We were making progress faster than I'd hoped. The environmental review, which had been languishing for months, was greenlit after 2 in-person meetings and a revised submission that cut through the red tape. The traffic variance was next, and my old inspector contact had already set up a lunch with the committee chair. Midweek, Harris forwarded me an email that had been CC'd to the investor group by mistake. A desperate memo from the firm to the board, trying to spin my departure as mutually beneficial and claiming they still had a working relationship with me. I sent Harris a single-line reply, "Correct the record." By Thursday, Lang called to give me an update. "The board voted to terminate their contract with the firm," he said. "We'll be moving the remaining design oversight to a competitor. Your scope remains the same, possibly expanding." I thanked him and hung up, picturing my former boss reading that memo. The fallout would be immediate: lost revenue, lost credibility. And in our line of work, once your reliability is in question, clients stop answering your calls. We filed the last batch of permit documents the following Monday. The process was still ongoing, but every major hurdle was cleared. The project would open on time. That night I walked past the construction site. Floodlights lit the skeletal steel, workers moving like shadows across the beams. The banners still carried the firm's logo, but soon that would change. The finished building would open under a different name, and mine would be listed where it mattered. They'd tried to erase me. Instead, they'd given me the cleanest break I could have asked for, and a bigger stage than I'd ever had before. 2 months later, the Civic Center project was running smoother than it had since the day it broke ground. The new design firm had slotted into place without fuss, mostly because my team handled the transition. We kept the paperwork moving, kept the city departments happy, and kept Lang's investor group informed at every stage. It was strange, working without the weight of the old firm's politics pressing down. No endless status meetings just to justify someone's title. No managers rephrasing my work so they could put their name on it. We just worked. And the results showed. The final permits landed on my desk in early spring. Thick folders, each stamped, signed, and ready. I set them in a neat stack and called Lang. "We're clear to build without restrictions," I told him. "That's the best news I've heard all year," he said. "The press will want a comment. You good with that?" I was. The article ran in the city's business journal the following week. The headline, "Permit Specialist Saves Landmark Project from Collapse." My photo was next to the story. Not staged, just me on site in a hard hat, reviewing plans with the crew. The piece didn't even mention the firm by name, only referring to initial administrative delays. Anyone in the industry knew what that meant. Calls started coming in from developers, architects, even other municipalities. They'd read about the project and wanted to know if I was available for theirs. I wasn't chasing work anymore, work was chasing me. I expanded the company, brought on 2 more coordinators, a junior researcher to track policy changes, and a part-time communications lead to handle the growing pile of inquiries. What had started as a legal safety net years ago was now a full-scale operation, and one of the most in demand in the city. One afternoon over coffee, Harris asked me if I'd ever thought about hiring my replacement from the firm. "They're not doing well," he said. "Your old boss burned a lot of bridges trying to keep that project, and now people are avoiding them." I shook my head. I don't hire to settle scores. I hire to win. Still, it was hard to ignore the irony. They'd thought cutting me loose would save them money. Instead, it had cost them their biggest contract, their reputation, and their footing in the market. That spring, the Civic Center's frame rose fast against the skyline. Steel, glass, and concrete took shape into something the whole city could see. Every time I passed, I felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing it was there because I'd refused to hand over my work for free. It wasn't just survival. It was proof that walking away doesn't mean losing, and being underestimated can be the sharpest advantage you'll ever have. And I wasn't done using it. By summer, the Civic Center was less a construction site and more a building with purpose. The outer glass was in place, the main atrium echoing with the sound of work that was ahead of schedule. Lang invited me to a walkthrough with the investor group. We moved from floor to floor, checking off progress points, the group nodding in approval. Cameras from the local news trailed us, capturing shots for an evening segment about the city's most anticipated public project. When the tour ended, Lang shook my hand for the cameras. "This man," he said, "is the reason we're standing here today." The clip ran that night. My phone lit up with messages from colleagues, old contacts, even a few competitors, some congratulating me, others fishing for collaboration. One photo from the coverage caught my attention. In the background of the handshake shot, standing at the far edge of the crowd, was my former boss. No camera on him, no title next to his name. Just another face watching something he no longer controlled. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. The expression on his face, that quiet, cornered stillness, told me everything. The project was mine now, in every way that mattered. And so was the future that came with it. The Civic Center opened on a bright fall morning. The plaza outside filled with city officials, press, and locals eager to see inside. I stood near the stage as Lang gave his speech, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. When he called my name, I stepped up to polite applause, the flash of cameras briefly blinding me. I kept it short, thanked the teams, the city, and the people who believed in the work. No grand gestures, no digs at the past. Afterward, as people filtered inside for the tour, I lingered near the edge of the plaza. That's when I saw him, my former boss, standing alone, hands in his pockets, watching the crowd stream past. He looked smaller somehow, his usual sharpness dulled. Our eyes met for a moment. He gave the faintest nod, and I returned it. No words. None needed. I turned away and walked up the steps into the building, sunlight catching on the glass above. This was the start of something bigger, and for the first time in years, every step forward was entirely my own.